Andrew Wood would be born to a close-knit family in Columbus, Mississippi in 1966. Throughout his childhood, his family moved around a lot as his father was in the military. They would live in San Antonio, Texas in the mid-70s before relocating to Bainbridge Island in the 80s, which was a short ferry ride away from Seattle. In his youth, Wood would find solace in Elton John, Kiss, and T-Rex, a sign of what was to come in his musical career. By the time he was in elementary school, Andrew was already dabbling in drugs, something which would lead to his downfall. Known for his charismatic style, Andrew Wood originally wanted to be a radio DJ, even winning a contest in the 6th grade to host a show on the local radio station KZOK on a program called Your Mother Wouldn't Like It. It was during this show Andy hosted a 3-hour program where he told stories, jokes, and did comedy bits in addition to playing music. Dave Rees, who would be Andy's bandmate in the band Malfunkshun, would recall in the book Everybody Loves Our Town. I remember talking to Andy after that, and he seemed a little disappointed because he wanted to be a DJ, but he realized there was no immediate feedback. There was no audience, and that really bummed him out. He actually told me, well, now I'm going to have to be a rock star. According to Kevin Wood, Andy's older brother, it would be a concert he saw in middle school where Cheap Trick opened for Kiss that made Andy want to become a rock star. Before we can talk about Mother Love Bone, we have to talk about another band that preceded it called Malfunkshun. Andy would form the band with his older brother Kevin when he was just 14. The brothers would end up recording their first demo tape during Easter Sunday in 1980 when they were left home alone while their family was at their grandmother's house. The name for their first band, Malfunkshun, would come from Andy's older brother Kevin. He used to work as a dishwasher at a restaurant and remembered seeing a sign above the dishwasher that read, "Report Malfunction." Eventually, the name got trimmed down to just Malfunkshun with an alternative spelling. Originally, Malfunkshun was a 4-piece, but was scaled down to a 3-piece band with Andy playing bass and doing vocals, while his brother Kevin played guitar, and they enlisted a punk drummer named Regan Hagar. David Rees, who was Malfunkshun's original bassist for a short period of time, said in the book Grunge is Dead, Malfunkshun was the loudest and most entertaining band I'd ever seen. Yes, they were louder than Motorhead. Andy's brother Kevin would recall in the same book, everyone had a good time at a Malfunkshun show. It was an open-minded sort of feeling. I was afraid first of offending the sensibilities of the punk rockers, but they welcomed us with open arms. I think we opened up doors for the bands to just come out, be themselves, and play. It's kind of what started the whole evolution of the punk turns into rock. While many associate grunge with flannel, one of the earliest so-called grunge bands was Malfunkshun, which didn't wear flannel. Wood would model his stage persona after theatrical performers including Mark Bolan, Freddie Mercury, Elton John, and Prince. Each member would take a different stage name, with Andy's stage name being Andrew the Love Child, while his brother would take on the name Kevin Stein, and their drummer Regan Hagar would become Thundar. Unlike a lot of his peers, Andy wanted to be a rock star, perform in arenas, and create music that appealed to the masses. Andy was so single-minded in his pursuit of success that according to Kerrang, he said he would even open up for Warrant. Andy's onstage persona would become the stuff of legends in Seattle, telling jokes in between songs, with one story having him even making a sandwich on stage. Another story involves Nirvana's Kurt Cobain going to a show tired and falling asleep, only to wake up and find Andy singing to him. Despite his onstage persona, Andy also had a very dark side. He would go to rehab in 1985, and Krisha Agaro, who was Pearl Jam Kelly Curtis's assistant, would recall in the book Grunge is Dead. He reminded me of John Belushi, constantly made everyone laugh. He was a total showman. He wanted to be as over the top as he possibly could, and I think in real life he was insecure. Unfortunately, like most of these kinds of artists like that, they have a dark side, and he was an addict. Scott Crane, who was the owner of Soundhouse Recording Studio in Seattle in the same book, would say, in probably '86, Andy's drug problems started to get bad. He broke down and started crying. This is one of the rare times you get to see the heart of Andy. He told me how he was a drug addict and needed money for drugs. Andy had been only 12 when he started drinking and smoking pot. 3 years later, at the age of 15, he graduated psychedelics, and by his early 20s, he was dabbling in heroin. The same year, Malfunkshun would appear on the legendary Deep Six compilation, which featured Seattle rock bands, including Green River, Soundgarden, and the Melvins. The founder of CZ Records, Chris Hanzig, would reveal what happened during the recording session for the album when Andy showed up, recalling every time he'd show up and record vocals for the Deep Six compilation, he'd be in full costume. Some brand new pair of sunglasses, a funky hat, a giant scarf, and funny coat. And I remember thinking, this is the studio, you don't have to dress up. But he did. I think that's what got him into character, he'd say. By the mid-80s, Andy soon started living with Chris Cornell of Soundgarden. To his bandmates, it brought them relief, as they knew Andy was struggling with drugs, and Chris Cornell at the time was on the straight and narrow. Soon enough, Andy would meet the love of his life, a woman named Zana LaFuente, who worked at a vintage clothing store. She would soon move in with Andy and Chris. By 1987, though, things for Malfunkshun had changed. The band grew frustrated. Despite influencing so many bands on the Seattle music scene, the local press largely ignored them, record labels showed no interest, and other bands, including Green River and Soundgarden, drew larger crowds. Kevin Wood would cite two factors working against the band, saying that they should have done a better job shopping around their demos, and that the band should have held on a bit longer. While Malfunkshun never officially broke up, Andy and Regan soon started jamming with former members of Green River, whose band had just broken up at the same time. Green River, for their part, would feature future Mudhoney and Pearl Jam members Mark Arm, Stone Gossard, and Jeff Ament. While Green River had a sizable following in Seattle, frontman Mark Arm was at odds with guitarist Stone Gossard and bassist Jeff Ament over their aspirations to sign with a major label, describing them as, and I quote, careerists. Mike Larson, who worked as a manager for Green River, would reveal in the book Everybody Loves Our Town that when he became the manager of the band, he saw a write-up in the local paper The Rocket stating that the band was in the studio with Joe Perry of Aerosmith working on their next album. Of course, the story wasn't true, but Larson would suspect it was Ament who planted the story in the paper to create buzz around the band. Green River's drummer Alex Shumway would reveal in the same book that Arm wanted to keep the band down to earth and the other guys wanted it to become something bigger. He would recall, there was even talk at one point of, hey, let's move down to LA and make it down there. That was Jeff and Stone's idea. It was more of something that was thrown against the wall. Mark was like, hell no. But bassist Jeff Ament would fire back in the same book saying there was some shit talking afterward about how me and Stone being careerists, which is what Cobain adopted later. I was the only guy in the band who didn't have a trust fund. I guess if not wanting to work at a restaurant for the rest of my life made me a careerist, then that was probably true, he'd say. By the way, guys, I've done a whole video on the feud between Pearl Jam and Nirvana. You guys can check it out in the link below. Arm in the same book would claim that he had no problem being in a successful band, but he didn't want to give vocal lessons or sound more commercial just for the sake of being successful. Also adding to the rift between him and his bandmates was that he was starting to dabble in drugs by the late 80s. The former members of Malfunkshun and Green River, including Andy Wood, Stone Gossard, Jeff Ament, and Regan Hagar, formed a short-lived cover band called Lords of Wasteland. By the following year in 1988, the group added guitarist Bruce Fairweather, formerly of Green River, and it was at the same time that Hagar would leave the band as he had a falling out with Ament and was soon replaced by drummer Greg Gilmore of the band 10 Minute Warning. The members of Malfunkshun initially thought that when Andy joined up with the members of Green River that he would split his time between both groups, and Mother Love Bone would possibly open up doors for Malfunkshun. But almost immediately, Mother Love Bone started attracting a lot of attention. It probably helped that Green River, by the time they'd broken up, was attracting some pretty big crowds, which seemed to spill over to Mother Love Bone's shows. For the former members of Green River, teaming up with Andy Wood was a huge change. Their previous singer Mark Arm was cynical, serious, and an anti-rock star type, while Andy wanted to be a rock star and didn't take himself too seriously, with local producer and engineer Jack Endino calling Wood, and I quote, the only stand-up comedian frontman in Seattle. Mother Love Bone's style of music shared more with LA's Sunset Strip than the bands who dominated Seattle's so-called grunge scene. Ament would compare both Green River and Mother Love Bone in Everybody Loves Our Town, saying, it was so different. Mark had such a heavy, cynical thing going on, and Andy's thing was pure comedy. I'd never been around anybody like Andy. Playing 4 quarter notes over and over again started to get old, and we were starting to develop groove. We were aspiring to mutate beyond just the hardcore super up-tempo things. Regan Hagar, who would serve as Mother Love Bone's original drummer, would reveal in the book Grunge is Dead how Andy, Stone, and Jeff were a match made in heaven, saying Stone and Jeff were determined businessmen. They were going to make it. Those guys were buckling down, practicing, making connections, and planning tours of their own. So those guys mixed with Andy's charisma and stage presence, it was like a match that sparked and took off. Chris Cornell would look back at the importance of Mother Love Bone in the 2005 documentary Malfunkshun, the Andrew Wood story, saying what was happening with commercial hard rock was it was eating itself. Nobody cared about songs. You had to look a certain way, sound a certain way. Mother Love Bone, they fit into this genre. But they were real. It was like a band stepping out of 1976. It was that genuine, he'd say. But not everybody counted themselves fans of Mother Love Bone in Seattle's music scene. Soundgarden guitarist Kim Thayil, revealed in the same book, "I liked every damn person in Mother Love Bone. I've always felt uncomfortable about the union. I think because I really like Green River and I was a huge fan of Malfunkshun, I saw Love Bone as trying too hard. Andy's stage presence with Malfunkshun seemed like a good dose of parody and homage. It was campy and witty. With Love Bone, the parodies seemed to be missing. It seemed more serious, more professional, which would make record companies and management happy. It just didn't seem right. It always seemed awkward. It seemed like it was forced, like they were trying, he'd say." During his time in Green River, Jeff Ament developed a lot of contacts in the music business. When Mother Love Bone started up, Ament reached out to those contacts to line up shows, and one of the women that Ament knew was a person named Anna Statman, who worked at Slash Records before leaving for Geffen Records. She initially offered to sign Mother Love Bone to a demo deal, basically giving them a few $1,000s to record a few songs and see whether the band was worth signing. Soon enough, several other labels were chomping to sign the band, and Ament would recall in the book Grunge is Dead what happened after the demo deal, saying, "We did that, it was just on. People started calling me at work. Within a month there were 7 or 8 labels that were trying to get up to Seattle to see us play or take us out to dinner. I think it's what Andy termed the Seattle dinner tour," he'd say. In November of 1988, the band signed a deal with Polygram subsidiary Polydor Stardog. The Stardog Records imprint was created exclusively for the band's future releases, and it would be famed A&R man at Polygram Michael Goldstone who signed the band, recalling to Rolling Stone, "Some of my warmest memories were watching Andy Wood play club shows, because Andy was a rock star even if there was only 6 people there. He would talk to the balcony even if there wasn't a balcony in the club," he'd recall. Ronan Givoni, the author of Not For You, Pearl Jam in the Present Tense, would tell The Independent, "Interestingly, I'm not sure if this is widely known, when Mother Love Bone signed to Polygram in, I believe, 1988, it was the most lucrative signing deal for a Seattle rock band up until that point. At that time, there was clearly a lot of enthusiasm among the major labels for flamboyant, theatrical Guns N' Roses type heavy metal," he'd say. For Polygram, Mother Love Bone released their debut EP Shine in March of 1989, almost a year before Wood's death. The EP would be done with producer Mark Deerenley, who worked with AC/DC, and it would contain one of Mother Love Bone's best-known tracks, the 8-minute-plus Chloe Dancer Crown of Thorns, which would later appear on the single soundtrack. By the later part of 1989, the band headed down to California to record at the Record Plant, the same studio where Guns N' Roses recorded their landmark record Appetite for Destruction. It was at the Record Plant that Mother Love Bone spent several months recording their debut LP Apple with producer Terry Date, who would go on to later work with Pantera in the 90s. It was during those recording sessions they would survive the 1989 earthquake, and the studio almost burnt down, with Date recalling in the book Grunge is Dead, "That was a lot of fun working on that record. We all lived in the same condo, we shared a couple of condos. Andy was a blast, almost burned down the studio once. He always leaves candles burning at his keyboard." But for bassist Jeff Ament, he had some regret over how the recording of Apple was done, claiming the studio costs were upwards of $1,000 a day and that the band should have spent more time rehearsing the songs before going into the studio. When Mother Love Bone first got together, Andy's bandmates were aware of his addictions. Stone Gosser would tell The Independent, "We knew about Andy's drug problem when he joined the band. He had just gotten out of treatment for the first time. There were times when we were not as responsible as we should have been. There were times we didn't take his problem as seriously as we should have." Meanwhile, Chris Cornell would recall in the 2005 Andrew Wood documentary about how Andy was intimidated by his bandmates' hyper-focus, recalling, "He looked at Stone and Jeff as being really organized and knowing what they were doing. That intimidated and scared him." On Thanksgiving of 1989, Andy would check into rehab just northeast of Seattle. While his bandmates lended support to him, they were focused on touring and releasing their debut record. By early 1990, Wood would once again relapse, and when his girlfriend notified his bandmates of the news, she would claim they didn't pay that much attention. His girlfriend would reveal in the same 2005 documentary, "He was coming home, crying, please help me stop, I'm going to die. I'd tell them," referring to the Mother Love Bone, "We need to talk about this." All they wanted to hear about was the record deal. It was like the Twilight Zone. They didn't want to hear about it, she'd say. With over 100 days of sobriety under his belt, on March 16, 1990, several days before the band's debut album was supposed to come out, Andy Wood would overdose on heroin. The same day Wood was supposed to go to the gym with Jeff Ament, but the bassist canceled, not feeling well. Wood went back to his apartment. He called up manager Kelly Curtis, telling him he couldn't make it to rehearsals that night. In the book Grunge is Dead, Regan Hagar would point to a man that Wood was hanging out with from Bainbridge who supplied him with the drugs that night. While Curtis or the band may have thought something was up, It wasn't clear whether they notified Wood's girlfriend, who was at work at the time, to check on Andy. His girlfriend would find him unresponsive at 10 p.m. that night. His girlfriend would express some regret in the book Grunge is Dead, saying, "I was at a meeting at work and couldn't answer the phone. I don't know if he had tried to call. I took a couple of friends from work home, and that took about half an hour of my time. That always bothered me because the nurses at the hospital were saying if you'd been there 10 minutes sooner, because he wasn't dead or blue or anything, he was just asleep," she'd say. Andy would be taken to the Harborview Hospital where he was in a coma for 3 days. By March 19th, he would be declared dead. It was a deadly week in Seattle, as 4 other overdoses occurred the same day. Jeff Ament would recall how much of a shock the news was, revealing in the same book, "That night, Kelly, Curtis, Greg, and I were talking to a guy who was going to be our tour manager. That was as big of a punch in the gut as you could possibly have at that point. Andy was doing so good, and he was working out every day, going to meetings, seemed really stoked, about to live out his rock dreams." In the same book, his brother Kevin Wood expressed some doubt over whether Mother Love Bone would have given Andy a career in rock and roll, because as he put it, it was, and I quote, "cliche-ish," but at the same time revealed that Andy was working on a solo album with his brother around the time of his death. Polygram would posthumously release Apple several months after Wood's death in July of 1990, and reviewing the album, the New York Times stated the record was, and I quote, "the first of the big league Seattle rock stars." The band would do a limited amount of press to promote the album, speaking to the LA Times, with Stone Gossard saying, "Mother Love Bone died with him," going on to say, "I'm just stumbling around in the dark trying to do something nobody ever did. For this to go to some album graveyard would have been a crime. People should hear Andy. We could have hired another lead singer and gone on without him, but Andy was such a big part of the band's identity that it didn't make sense. He was the vocalist, he wrote all the lyrics and some of the music. He was the image of Mother Love Bone. To us, what Jagger is to the Stones," he'd say. The album would peak at number 77 on the Billboard charts, but who knows what could have been had Andy lived. The surviving members of Mother Love Bone would be in over $100,000 debt to Polygram. The news would send ripples throughout Seattle. The innocence of Seattle's music scene seemed to have been lost with Andy's death. Tributes soon poured in, with Alice in Chains penning the track Wood, while Soundgarden frontman Chris Cornell would team up with Ament and Gossard, recording a tribute album under the band name Temple of the Dog, a line taken from a Mother Love Bone song. Ament and Gossard would go on to form Pearl Jam with Eddie Vedder and Mike McCready, and become one of the biggest rock bands for the next 3 decades. But not everybody celebrated their success. Andy's girlfriend would tell Another Man magazine, "I remember hearing 10 and feeling cheated because I knew Andy had written at least 25% of the melodies and the songs with Stone on there. It was weird watching them become the biggest band in the world," she'd say. Polygram would release a Mother Love Bone compilation in September of 1992, and the same year the band would appear on the single soundtrack. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe, and we'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.